What's something embarrassing you are willing to admit? Story 1. I used to live in Alaska, and the highways are pretty desolate. I drank a cup of coffee from my thermos, and the urge to poo hit me hard and fast. I held it for about 2 minutes, thinking the urge would pass. It didn't. So I pulled over on the shoulder, got out of my car, and listened for any oncoming vehicles. Nothing. I proceeded to pull my pants down and squat by the side of the road. I was spray-shitting for about 5 minutes and just staring off into the distance, enjoying the view, when all of a sudden a goddamn silent-ass Prius pulled up to see if I needed help and saw me pushing a turd. A little boy pointed at me and screamed. Story 2. I audibly shit myself in a boardroom meeting once. There were about 7 or 8 other people in the room, and it happened while my boss was speaking. He stopped talking, and there were some gasps. I didn't know what to do other than profusely apologize and go home. Next day, I apologized to my boss and told him I'd been ill. I still work at the same company, and it hurts every day. This was 2 years ago. Story 3. My partner and I were house hunting. We'd been looking in one area for a while and became familiar faces to a few real estate agents. We took a little break from looking, but when we started back again, we walked into an open house, and there was a real estate guy that we'd had lots of dealings with previously. As we walked in, he walked excitedly towards us with his arms out, as if inviting a hug. Now, I'm an anti-hug person. I can't deal with those overly familiar people who always try to touch you, but I was going through a phase where I was trying to be less of a cow about it, so against my better instincts, I went in for the hug. I spoke to my partner as we left the house about how weird it was for a real estate guy to want to hug people looking at houses, and we laughed about it. About a week later, it dawned on me that he wasn't using hug arms. He was just doing those wide, hey guys arms. It's one of those things that pops up in my mind at least once a week, and I have to yell loudly to exercise the cringe. My face has turned into a tomato just recounting it here. Story 4. I couldn't finish my degree because I'm a shitty student. I kept on failing courses. I'd start off strong, lose interest after a month, coast for a while, last-minute cramming for the mid-semester, then repeat for the rest of the semester. I did well at school, but in the self-supported environment of university, I just didn't have the motivation needed. Story 5. My crush on a guy is what got me through high school. I struggled heavily with depression, and every day that I woke up and didn't want to exist, I'd force myself to go to school on the chance that I'd be able to see him during the one class we had together in the morning. Being able to see him was the highlight of my day some days, and I probably spent an unhealthy amount of time just silently admiring him. I can count how many interactions we've had on one hand. Throughout the 3 years I knew and crushed on him, we never even had an actual conversation, and I kept my distance, even as I treasured each time we made eye contact or I noticed him looking in my direction. We were from 2 very different worlds, and as far as I know, he has no idea I acknowledged his existence. He doesn't know that he basically saved my academic career just by existing, and he never will. Story 6. I was standing in line at Walmart, and the guy's dentures in front of me fell out onto the ground. I didn't realize what. He dropped, so I bent down to get them, and saw it was a full set of teeth. I then decided not to touch them since he has to put them in his mouth. After standing back up, I felt like that was rude, and he might think I didn't touch them because they are gross. I changed my mind and bent back down to grab them, but as my hand was like 3 inches away, I thought to myself that he definitely doesn't want me to touch them, so I stood back up. The entire time this guy was standing there watching me bend down and stand up several times. The final time I stood up, he locked eyes. He gave me a weird look, then snatched them aggressively and walked away. I still have no idea if I should have grabbed them or not. It was just embarrassing having him watch me be indecisive about his teeth. Story 7. I was getting a routine blood test done a couple years ago. The nurse tech doing the blood draw was pretty cute, so I was trying to act tough even though I hate needles. It went well until she took the band thingy off my arm. I hadn't eaten that day, so as soon as she took it off, I started getting lightheaded. I told her I felt dizzy, and I remember her saying to lean forward. The next thing I remember is being on the floor with 5 people standing over me. I had passed out and pissed myself. Needless to say, I did not ask the cute nurse tech out after that. Story 8. Roughly 10 or 15 years ago, I had to go to an urgent care center for a pretty nasty sinus infection. While I was in the waiting room, a young woman walks in from the back and calls my first name. Assuming she's the nurse, I start heading towards her. Turns out she was a patient and she was trying to get the attention of the guy she was with, who just happened to have the same name as me. I was absolutely embarrassed and mortified by this. Story 9. The first time I ever spoke in public was a debate competition when I was 13. I pissed myself in front of teachers, peers, opponents, other schools, judges, and any other descriptor for a person in that 200-person audience. I was embarrassed, but decided that nothing more embarrassing would likely happen if I spoke in public again, and now I have no fear of public speaking. Story 10. One time when I was around 5 or 6, I was outside playing with friends and I really needed to pee. I could have gone to my friend's house, but I hated peeing at other people's houses, so I ran home to pee in a toilet I was familiar with. I made it into the bathroom, pulled my pants down with the lights out because I was in such a hurry, sat down, and fell into the toilet bowl. My father had left the seat up. I fell into the toilet, in the water. He hadn't flushed. I fell into toilet water and my father's piss. Pretty sure I cried. I was too traumatized to tell anyone. Story 11. I always tell this story when this question pops up. When I was in the 6th grade, my friends used to call me a dildo all the time. I used to hate it, and get so pissed every time they did. Crucially, I didn't know what a dildo was, but I had a sneaking suspicion that it was a penis. So close, yet so far. I didn't realize my error until one fateful day, when my friends once again decided to call me a dildo during PE. In my anger, I shouted, "At least I have one." I'm 30 years old, and to this very day, anytime I see one of those people, they inevitably bring up the fact that in the 6th grade, I shouted that I had a dildo. Story 12. During 5th grade, we had a game show-style contest, where they'd ask you questions from a wide range of topics, from science to history, to popular culture, to literature. The first to hit the button gets to answer, and if they answer correctly, they get points. I ended up representing my class after getting randomly chosen for the finals section. Our class was almost winning. The category for the question was movies and TV. I thought, this would be easy compared to the other categories. In the 1933 film set in New York, what was the name of the movie's giant gorilla? And for some reason I hit the button first, and, out of almost reflex action, answered without thinking, Godzilla. I realized I messed up about a millisecond later, but it was too late. I ended up making my class lose, and they didn't let me live it down for a very long time. Story 13. I'm pretty sure my husband just tolerates me because we have kids together. He's cheated on me more than once and is constantly back and forth between wanting to be with me or not. He says he's not in love with me and never will be again. Yet I don't go anywhere. Here I am holding on to hope that one day maybe he will actually love me like a partner. Story 14. I once peed myself in 1st grade. I had to go to the bathroom at recess, but the teacher wouldn't let me use the bathroom and pretty much blocked me from going inside. I wasn't able to hold it and pissed on myself, not wanting to get in trouble. Now I tell my stepkids, if you have to piss bad enough, just go. I'll deal with the school and teachers if they try to get you in trouble. I've told the same thing to teachers when we have parent-teacher conferences. So far, we haven't had any issues. Story 15. Last summer, I was in a crowded elevator when my stomach decided to betray me with the loudest growl of hunger imaginable. It echoed in the small space, and every head turned to look at me. I tried to play it cool, glanced at my phone as if I received a funny message, and said, "Haha, guess it's dinner time?" But my face was flaming red. I could feel their stares until I finally escaped at my floor. Haven't taken that elevator since without making sure I've eaten first. Story 16. Ooh, I have a couple. I sharted on my newly bought IKEA chair a couple years back, and my family has no idea. I was on laxatives at the time and needed to pass wind, but something else made a surprise appearance. Runny poo. Luckily, I stopped it in its tracks and proceeded to the loo. But man, it left one stinky 55 brown stain which I had to vigorously wipe off. It all came off, but anytime someone sits there, it takes me back. Story 17. It was the first day of class in college, and we had to do that whole awkward thing where we introduce ourselves, what our major is, etc. Except this time it was different. Not only did we have to introduce ourselves, we had to remember the name and major of the person across from us and say it out loud as well. The guy across from me was a rap artist. Don't remember his major, but he said his name, so-and-so, and his alias, which was Jail Fate. So when it was my turn, I stood up and introduced him as, "This is so-and-so, aka Jailbait," and everyone started laughing. I didn't know what was going on, so I just awkwardly stumbled through my name and major while the entire class was still laughing. It wasn't until I sat back down that I realized what I had done. Still laugh and cringe about it to this day. Story 18. Got out of an 8-year relationship and ended up chatting with a woman on one of the dating apps. We hang out and quickly things get spicy. Right before they get really spicy, I'm on top of her and I realize my face, her shoulders, chest feel pretty oddly wet. Whatever right? We had been messing around. We were just sweaty, right? Fucking wrong, lol. Lights were off, and I couldn't tell that I actually had a bloody nose, and we are now both pretty thoroughly covered in my blood. Luckily, she didn't freak out, kind of laughed it off and helped me clean up. Not surprisingly, there was no sexy time, and she stopped talking to me a few days later, Mao. Thinking about it now, I still want to crawl into a hole and die, but at least it gave her a funny story to laugh with her friends about. Story 19. Honestly, at this point, my entire life had been a succession of embarrassing incidences. Currently, my colleagues find it difficult to decipher my response because I shake my head when I'm saying yes. Also, I randomly fall, and they point out that they notice that I tangled my legs up while walking and stumbled while walking in a path which doesn't have any obstruction. You can find me screaming in my pillow around 3 because that's when all the recollection of embarrassing incidences hit the most. Some of the other highlights are, well, saying hi to this guy and talking to him a lot like I know him, and later realizing that guy wasn't who I thought he was. Just that both the guys have same hairstyle. Except that, they look entirely different. I don't remember faces much. Or names. Waving hi at a guy when I'm not wearing my glasses, thinking he's someone who's a close friend. He was not. Ooh, also I closed the car door on someone's hand. Another recent highlight was, well, my friend was over, and I wanted to give some clothes I bought for my pet to another friend. My cats were too big for it, and this other friend, let's call him G, brought home a new pet cat. I called G, talking about when he's meeting me, being all rude like I usually am with him. He's like, I am not at that place anymore. Me, oh, I know you are. Him, I can send you my location. Me, do it. Then he does, and I notice the contact. It's entirely different mate who has the same name. I called the wrong person and claimed they were at a location they weren't in. My friend who was watching it all during a later time, he laughed a lot when it was occurring. Whereas, how did you not notice the difference in voice? Their voices are so different. I can go on and on about these. I'm used to them at this point. Had years of experience with the clumsiness. Story 20. Not sure how unusual this is, but I live alone, but have a pretty healthy social life. Nonetheless, when alone, I talk to myself out loud. Like have full-on conversations. Tell myself stories from my past. Explain things to myself. Respond as if someone is asking for more information or details, etc. I am used to it now. There have been a couple of times when I have caught myself and been actually concerned that I am going too far with it. But for the most part, I am okay with it. But I'm afraid that I will get caught, or that when I get older and start losing my mind, I will lose all inhibition and start doing it in public. Story 21. I was waiting alone at a bus stop one day, and a blind man passes by and asks out loud for help to locate the church, which we're probably 30 meters from. I guess he was maybe partially blind because I think he knew I was there, but he really acted like a blind man, swinging his cane in front of him as he walked. Like an idiot, I proceed to point in the direction of the church, and he seemed to understand my gesture, but he started walking in the wrong direction. I felt so dumb and ashamed that I didn't say anything, and painfully watched him head further away from the church as I kept waiting the bus. Story 22. People's opinions have a major impact on my emotional well-being, and I defend against this by only making friends with people that I know have my best interest at heart. This leads me to take less risk and form less bonds with people I am not sure about. I am a people pleaser, and I have a hard time telling people no. I can argue with someone in my head, but when it comes to face, I pretty much just do whatever to make it happen. Need me to drive 3 hours? Sure, why not, when I wanted to relax and enjoy my weekend. I would say I guess I just don't like confrontation, but I am also very principled, so I tend to just avoid people I don't like and cut people off that I feel have put me into uncomfortable situations. I think this is growth limiting and stupid, but here we are. These are things I find very embarrassing, and who knows, maybe things change the more I think about how these things make me feel pathetic. Story 23. Hey, something embarrassing happened to me today. I got out of Walmart's and couldn't find my car where I usually park it. That's because I went to the pet store beforehand. So I'm walking around the parking lot with my cart and pushing the key fob button to see if I can hear the car. I can't, so I leave my cart in the parking lot by the side of the road. I finally find my car, but when I return to where I thought I left my cart, I can't find it. I asked 2 Walmart associates who are working in the parking lot if they moved it. They said no, but I hoe inside the store and there is the full of groceries next to the service counter. Apparently the associate who moved it inside WT on break. So I take the cart from store, bring it to my car, and drive home. When I told my wife the story, her response was, You're dangerous, LOL. Story 24. My pre-COVID brain had significantly above average memory. I'd remember the names of people I'd met only once, even a few years later. Now I can't even remember the name of someone I met yesterday. Just earlier this week, my workplace organized a large internal event where colleagues from other departments and functions were present too. And this one woman came up to me and casually started chatting me up. After a few minutes of conversation, I casually introduced myself and held out my hand. She looked confused and said, "But we already know each other." And I was like, "No, I'm quite sure I haven't seen you before today." She asked me if I had attended a tree planting drive 2 years ago and said she was sure we'd met there. I said no, I wasn't part of any tree planting sessions. So she let it go and introduced herself, and we chatted a little bit longer before going to get seated at our respective tables. At the next coffee break, she comes running to me, calling out my name from a distance, and as I turn around, I see her showing me a photo of her and me at the above-mentioned tree planting drive. And then the memory finally clicked. I was so embarrassed at this point that I didn't even react externally, just casually said, "I'm sorry I didn't remember this," and walked on to get my coffee. Story 25. I spent many years focused on acceptance and popularity from my peers. I am a highly intelligent individual, or so the school board would continuously tell me. Instead of focusing my goals towards education, I jumped the first into the world of crime. I hear so many of these wannabe tough guys at the pub or out somewhere talking about all the fights that they've got into and all the criminal activity they supposedly had a hand in. I find it so sad and pathetic because someone like myself who has actually firsthand witnessed murder, death, a timeline showing families fall apart, and the roots creating broken homes, they wouldn't be talking about it the way they do. I find it embarrassing now at my age that my accolades I focused on were copious amounts narcotics to traffic, and the plethora of illegal and just not right decisions that I decided to choose, trying to fit into a lifestyle that it took years for me to realize it wasn't me. Story 26. This isn't that embarrassing, but once when I was in second grade, I was the last one to leave the class, and when I tried to go out the front door, it didn't open. Pull on it, nothing. Push, still locked. I did this for half a minute until panic kicked in, and I started thinking that I left so late that they already locked the doors. The logical step was to start running down the hallways while crying and screaming, until a nice teacher came to my aid and pushed down on the door handle to open it. She looked so confused.